Hey everybody, welcome back to I Know a Guy. I'm Anthony, and this is the podcast where connections thrive. Each episode, we spotlight inspiring entrepreneurs, professionals, and individuals doing amazing things. Together, we'll grow your circle, spark collaborations, and discover new opportunities. Today, we're meeting Olivia Atkin, a leader in the podcasting industry and the host of the globally acclaimed Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. As the founder of Achieving Success LLC and Turn to Designs, Olivia combines her expertise in podcast strategy and her passion for supporting the U.S. Coast Guard to create lasting impact across industries. How are you doing today, Olivia?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I was excited to have you on. I loved our conversation we had the other day. I loved your energy. We were just talking before we started rolling about how you got beat up a little bit on the slope skiing. So I'm glad you made it, even though you're a little bit bruised. So I was happy to have you on, and I wanted to make some introductions for you because there's a lot of people out there that would definitely benefit from getting to know you. So just started off, where are you calling in from?
I'm currently calling in from Juneau, Alaska. So a distance away, and for most an experience away, as I like to say it. But it's a beautiful place. I recommend everyone coming out once in their lifetime. There's a lot of opportunities to connect with nature, ski, and as I like to joke about it, get to the top of that mountain that you're trying to achieve your goals with.
Yeah. No, I think you're the first interview that I've done with somebody in Alaska. So are you newer to the area, or have you been there for a while?
So, as you mentioned, my ties to the U.S. Coast Guard, my boyfriend is a chief in the Coast Guard. So we actually got here this year, and we're here for 2 years. So every season so far has been a new season for me.
Awesome. So you said everybody should go and visit at some point. Let's say you have some friends flying in. Where are you going? What are you doing? And what are you guys doing for dinner?
So I get this question actually a lot because people really want to know what it's like here and what they could do. I say depends on the season. So if you want to come in winter, we're definitely going skiing. My go-to is sushi because the fish is so fresh and you get a lot. It will change if you like sushi. It'll change your perspective on sushi or anything fish related. And then if you come in summertime, we're definitely going out on the water, watching, different animals, sea lions, fish, whales, every animal we see here. And then fishing, and then throughout the year, you can see the northern lights right here. So that's a pretty cool experience too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know this last year they made it a little bit further south, so a lot more people were able to see them. But it's got to be something different up there.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more frequent, and they're probably a little bit more intense. Especially if they're intense enough to go south that far, they're probably wild up there. So that would be amazing. But yeah, what can you tell us about what you do?
So with Achieving Success LLC, I work with people to either get on the right podcast to share their voice and make an impact, share their expertise. And then I work with individuals and businesses who want to start and or grow their already existing podcast effortlessly, but intentionally, and really help their branding, marketing, and just overall growth strategy, making it as simple as possible and organic as possible. Because there are a lot of things we could all do, let's say from a business standpoint, that, okay, we could pay someone and we can get listens, right? Or we could do this and all of a sudden our numbers will increase, which will help XYZ. But a lot of times, the second you stop paying someone to get these listens or have this happen, your numbers drastically drop, which will affect a lot of things across the board. So I work with people when they're starting and growing their podcast as a monthly package so that I'm continuously helping them and building out their strategy, the consistency. I call myself the accountability coach in that, of just keeping the eye on the ball and going, okay, this is what we have. This is what we need. Let's get in studio. Let's get it done so that they don't even have to think about it. And then the titles, descriptions. I always say podcasters always think of the content first, making sure they're asking the questions to get the conversation they want, all these other aspects. What ends up coming last, and most of the time an afterthought, is the title and description. But I say, think of your title as the thing that's going to get someone to stop scrolling. When you have certain kind of guests on and, if they could turn anywhere, what's going to get them to go, oh, that sounds interesting. And then that description should be your 90-second elevator pitch. Now that you've gotten them to stop scrolling, what's that thing that's going to actually get them to say, okay, yes, I want to take the time to listen to this interview. I want to do this. And also making things accessible and easy for the eyes. So formatting is really important. We do formatting in our episodes. But again, a lot of time it gets forgotten in setting things up for reading purposes. And then I work on the SEOing and making sure everything is optimized and overseeing the workflow so that, again, a business owner, someone who's already working 40 to 80 hours a week, is not putting an additional anywhere from 22 or 13 to 22 hours a week when it comes to their podcast. Because on average, if someone was to do it all themselves or to bring on someone who is an expert in it, you're spending 13 to 22 hours a week to put out an episode to really make sure it gets the traction and gets the pull you want.
How'd you get started doing this? Is this something you always wanted to do, or how'd you back into it? Was there a happy accident, or how'd that go?
So I would say a happy accident, but I would also say it was done with intention. And mixing both of those. So one thing I always live by is always taking the opportunity you have in front of you today and running with it. So I started out in professional sports. And when I was graduating, I already had a job with the New York Giants. I was the youngest intern they had and then stayed with them. But I had a business management major, dual minor, sports studies and law, and decided at the time to get my HR certification and project management certification. And people were like, why would you do that? You're working in sports. And I'm like, well, the opportunity's here. Why not take advantage of it? So if I need it or want it down the road, I already have it and I have this expertise. And that's how I live. So when I left sports, I went in and got my master's in supply chain, got multiple certifications. And by the time I left, I had a degree or certification in every business area. And fast forward, I worked at Lockheed, ended up asking to teach at a university, teaching career development, because I can really understand most of the business aspects and career growth. And I was also doing speaking at the time of just going to universities, telling students what to expect, how to think outside the box to get that job. And a publishing company approached me who was looking for someone to write a textbook for colleges and high schools on career development. And I ended up, again, never thought I'd write a book, but the opportunity sat in front of me. And I was like, okay, if I can make an impact and help one additional person that I might not be able to ever reach, let's do it. And ended up writing that book. And when it was completed, we did like a wrap up party, and they came to me and they were like, Olivia, every time you've gotten us on a call, you're the one like challenging our time frame, our way of thinking, like building team development. They're like, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Again, never saying no to an opportunity and not knowing anything about the podcast industry. I was like, well, I'm assuming they have a division of podcasting as a publishing network. And I was like, no, but who can I talk to about it? And they're like, oh, no, we have no one. We just think like you have so many different stories, X, Y, Z, you should do it. And I was like, at the time, still teaching, working a 40+ hour job a week, doing all these things. And I looked at them and I'm like, thank you, but you do know I try to have a life too. I also volunteer with a few nonprofits. So I was like, my plate is beyond filled. This sounds great. And fast forward, that was in July. Fast forward to the last week in August, I ended up not going back and teaching at the university. And I was like, this idea of a podcast kept coming into my mind of there's so many conversations that need to be had. Voices need to be shared because there's a lot of misconception on what success looks like and people's journeys and point A to point B. And I was like, the podcasting space might be the space to do this. And September 7th, I decided to start researching and seeing if it would be a good fit. Within 2 weeks, every spare moment was learning about the industry, doing informational interviews with every top producer I could get my hands on, every top podcaster I could get my hands on, just seeing what works, what doesn't work. And then I decided to start my podcast and start Achieving Success LLC. And in the beginning, my idea for the consulting side of the business was going to be career development. My book's about career development. We're talking career development on the podcast and personal development. And I was like, easy fit, right? I can help with that. Very quickly, organically, because of all the knowledge I'd obtained working to set my podcast up, my podcast became a top 10% most listened to podcast globally. In 30 days, it had over 300 views with only promoting one clip of me saying the podcast is now released and like a clip of that. And it was in 5 countries within 30 days. And very quickly, when I started walking in a room, no one cared about my career development. They were like, how do I get on a podcast? How, I've had a podcast for 3 years and I'm getting 5 views a week, or, I'm not achieving those goals I'd set in mind to get new clients or do network or do this and that. And I quickly realized my expertise and like my over diligence was an added benefit. And that's when I said, okay, a few weeks into Achieving Success LLC's business being open, I'm no longer going to be doing career development. There's a gap here. Like, this is where I'm meant to help and share my knowledge and help other people hit those goals they have and use their voice to make that impact. And I've been doing it ever since. We're over 120 episodes into the podcast, and it's a top 5% most listened to podcast globally, the only one in all 7 continents. Every one of my clients that I work with from a podcast host perspective is a top 10% most listened to podcast globally. And just seeing the impact everyone's getting to make, whether it's as a host or as a guest, has been really rewarding.
That's amazing. Out of all of that, what is it that you love most about what you're doing now?
I love watching the connections and that get made through podcasting. And I also love, and this is probably my favorite out of the two, because I do have 2 favorite aspects of it, but the empowerment someone feels by telling their story and sharing their knowledge when all said and done, with whether it's from a host perspective or a guest perspective. The amount of times I've had guests or listeners come to me from my show or my client shows that are like, that changed my mindset. I felt like someone heard me in that conversation, or a host coming to me and go, I didn't realize that it could be this rewarding and this fun. And and I'm like, yes, exactly. That's the thing. Until you're in it and you're really diving in, podcasting is a avenue that most people don't realize can be so effective and impactful.
Yeah, no, it really is. And to your point, there's so many awesome people out there doing awesome things, and being able to share that with other people, just personally on my end, it's super fun. It's super amazing. And then they get their message out there, because A lot of people, they just need a place to talk where it's not just a one-on-one. It's a 1-on-10, a 1-on-100, 1-on-1,000, 1-on-100,000, however big. And it's amazing to see the kind of reach that can get. So that's awesome. What does your average client look like? What are the pain points that somebody might be going through that if they're dealing with X, Y, Z, you're the person that they should be talking to?
So from a podcast host perspective, it's someone who goes, podcasting could be an interesting avenue to go down. And I want to do it. I know I want to leverage this. I don't have the time. I don't know where to begin. I just know I want to have these conversations and leverage it and in different ways. And I don't even know the different ways I could be leveraging recording for 30 minutes to an hour to, for my goals. And then I come in and I work with them and we set it up and we build that strategy out and we really sit down and build them out a podcast. And it's also the individual who's already started and is like, I don't have the time. Think of it, 13 hours a week to 22 hours a week. Someone who wants to make sure that their podcast grows and they are successful in achieving their goals, they're spending potentially on their own if they don't hire someone else. Imagine what you could do with 2+ days of your work week back. Even if you're on the low end, right? 12 hours a week. Imagine that's a day and a half. Imagine what you could do with a day and a half time. You could be working to sign more clients. You can be working on other business growth, process implementation, that new product you want to integrate into your system, or you could be just enjoying time off. And so when you think about it that way, it's like, okay, it's money worth spent because now I know it's going to get done right and I don't have to think about it. I remember there was one client who came to me, who was referred to me, and I just got on a phone call with him and we're talking and he's like, Olivia, you're hitting all the points. And he goes, can I admit something to you? Now, up to this point, I was like, okay, what are you about to admit to me? Like, what's about to happen? He goes, I've been trying to start my podcast for over a year. I have 75 recorded, unedited episodes. Didn't fully know where I'm going with things, but I don't have a title. I don't have a description or a clear strategy of what any of this should be. I just have these recorded. I never had the time to sit down and do all these other things. And I really don't have the clarity or understanding. Within a week and a half, I took that, like, hey, I have all these recordings. Like, what can we do with this? What could be the theme? This is just like what I'm thinking, into a full-blown plan, title, description, cover art, episodes uploading, and already getting views with him not promoting anything. And that was like my first experience with the host that came to me and like from the bat knew, yes, podcasting, you don't have to sell me on anything. I want to do it, but I'm so lost in the time consumption of it and just all this different information. I don't even know where to begin. And to see how quickly we were able to pivot and then him go, oh, wow, now I'm getting outreach from more clients. Now I'm like getting people who are, listening to this in areas I've been, parts of the country that I've been trying to get into, just didn't know how to get that reach. And so it's moments like that that make it so.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because, well, like you said, you're freeing up all that extra time, a day and a half, 2 days, however many days a week, that they're now able to devote to the new clients that they're getting, right? Because if you were getting new clients and you still don't have that freedom, where are you going to put them, right? So having that extra time to get the clients that are coming in just because of how it's working now, it works hand in glove. So that's awesome. What about power partners? What are other industries or other professionals that you work really well with, synergize well with, or find a lot of collaboration opportunities with?
So I work really well with individuals in branding, marketing when it comes to them owning their own business, because a lot of times people are already open to the idea of podcasting and, helping that with branding or marketing purposes. They know there needs to be more, and there's this new avenue out there. I also work really well with people who come to me or start to refer with me who are speakers or consultants for different companies or industries, because they're going in a lot of times and having these conversations about ways to expand or free up time or, leverage different tools in someone's toolbox to achieve their goals. And so a lot of times those are the individuals who are referring to me in general. When it comes to a client perspective, because of my own personal background, as well as podcasting is a lovely industry where it is not selective on who needs to enter in to be a podcaster. When it comes to working with podcast hosts right now, I've clients who are spine surgeons, I have real estate agents, I have finance advisors, lawyers. So it's really individuals from home industries that I work with as well.
Okay. What advice would you give an aspiring or a new entrepreneur?
So my biggest advice that I would give a inspiring or new entrepreneur is twofold. I've been giving you a lot of twofold things today. The first is just do it. Like, the longer you take to think about it and go, okay, the timing has to be right, this has to be right, it's never going to be perfect. And entrepreneurship, you have to understand in general, is going to be filled with ebbs and flows. And so you have to just take that leap and know that over time, when you're not taking that leap, you're already making the decision for yourself. This second part of it is when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, one thing I very consciously did was I said, how much of the work can I do myself? What can I do, right? So I say this as I have a minor in law, but I was like, I'm not doing my LLC filing. I don't have that expertise. So I have a lawyer for both my businesses that does my filing. If, something comes up, handles it. I have an accountant. I can do all my taxes and the taxes for all my business. Not, again, going back to time saving and understanding, not my expertise, not where my time fits. However, when it comes to starting my business, I said, okay, I'm going to be doing all the emails myself. And to this day, I answer every email that comes in myself. I don't have a VA. I don't have any form of assistant. I sat there and said, okay, what can I learn? What additional tools? And a lot of times when I talk to young entrepreneurs just starting out and they're in that 0 to 6 months in or 6 months to a year time frame, they are looking at, okay, I got to hire. And they go, Olivia, I stopped them immediately. And I was like, no, pump the brakes here. You have no cash flow yet or very little cash flow coming in. And here's your goal in 6 months. And they're like, yeah, but in order to grow, I have to hire. And I said, yes, but you're immediately now paying out money without guaranteed money coming in the door. So yes, it might take some work off your plate. Or are you time allocating correctly? And are you time blocking? Are you writing all your tasks down? How is your workflow going? Because a lot of times businesses that last past that first year, when you talk to the entrepreneur, they got in the weeds of things. They were doing it themselves. And that's how they start making profits at that 1 year or 2 year mark. Because they said, what can I do myself? And where does my time and energy need to go?
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, both fold. keep doing twofold. It's like buy one get one. It's fantastic, all the value. So that's amazing. How can podcasters optimize their shows to reach a global audience?
So there's a few things you could do, and I've mentioned this word a few times. You really need to have that strategy in place. So Consistency helps with optimization as well, and a lot of people don't realize this. So on the back end, for example, of Google and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, what ends up happening if they see a podcast that is releasing every Tuesday at 7 a.m., they go, okay, they're consistent. So we're going to put them higher on the list and like be easier to find than the podcast that is releasing all different days, every few weeks, like randomly, right? There's no consistency to it. That also helps the audience know what to expect and go there and actually follow and actually listen. And again, people like schedules, they like rhythms. And the second part is really think about when creating your title and description and things talking about making sure some of those keywords of what you've talked about or topics get covered in that description, because that description pulls back to the conversation. And if they are also words that people are potentially searching, and again, you want to think about that when writing a title and description, you definitely want it to be the hook and like get them to click. But you also want to take into consideration what people are searching, what they're looking for that ties, because you don't want to do a bait and switch with someone. You'll lose all your following very quickly. That ties to the actual conversation. So there can be a little bit, there's a fine line, I say, of like going full-blown clickbait and what's going to get the clicks and being authentic and organic. Because if you go to clickbait, the reverse situation is going to happen and you are going to lose your authority in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fantastic advice. There's a lot of us that can kind of get pulled into that because we've seen people do it and like, oh, it has to work because, it can bite you. So how can entrepreneurs use podcasting to build their brand, to help them connect with those international audiences as well?
Yeah, so that is a great question. A lot of entrepreneurs can use podcasting for a few different ways. It comes to building a personal and professional brand because now someone can actually connect with you, hear your voice, understand the kind of individual you are. There's been a stat that came out in the end of 2024, when we look at the year's roles, that 86% of individuals who listen to podcasts say they buy a service or product from listening to a podcast host or guest they have on their show. So think about where people are coming in now. They're no longer looking at ads the same way. They're not tuning it. Most people aren't listening to commercials anymore. They have, their Netflix, their Hulu, all these wonderful places, but they want to be able to trust the person they're buying from. And a podcast is a way to be able to connect with individuals and make sure that they like who you are. I recently had a conversation with someone and they're like, marketing is like a dating app, right? Online marketing is like dating. And I said, yeah, and podcast is that more serious relationship, because when you think about it, that is really where they're going. So it's understanding and leveraging the time. The other thing, and you and I have talked about this, is you sit down for a 30-minute to an hour interview, whatever it might be. That's good content for iTunes, Spotify, if you do video, putting it up on YouTube, but you could create clips. Well, now you have your social media content out of that for a week, 2 weeks, whatever your schedule might be. You have shorts now for YouTube. You have something you can send someone to show your own expertise. You could leverage some of that content for your website. And there's so many different ways you could put it, but it also helps you get your name out there. And there's a lot of things that podcasting can allow you to do. If you search, for example, Achieving Success or Olivia Atkin or Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin, really any of the three, I become the first 5 pages of Google. I did not pay Google anything to become the first 5 pages of Google. All of that was organic. Why? Because my name was continuously tied to episodes. My brand, the consistency of everything was always tied. So when people started searching certain words, my name, the podcast, even TED Talks or guest appearances, I am on podcasts for television appearances. It all started populating organically. And that's just building awareness. And I think all those things, people come to me and they have multi-million-dollar companies and they've been in the game for 20 years. And then they're like, for example, I want to get on a podcast. And I'm like, I can't find you anywhere online. Like, you're telling me you've done all these amazing things and you've had all these amazing, but I can't find one thing online of you. That's an issue because in today's age, people want to be able to click. And those are different ways to leverage podcasting.
Yeah. Well, that's the joke. It's like, where's the best place to hide a body? On the second page of Google, right? If you're there, you're nowhere. So absolutely. And yeah, people that tune in daily, weekly, monthly, however often, they're way more likely to trust you as opposed to somebody that was on one ad one time that they saw in passing. That might trigger the idea and they go, you know what? I think Olivia said something about that. I'm going to go refresh myself, and then you're the authority. So it's nothing but good for your brain. It's awesome.
Exactly. And the other thing is 43% of individuals in the U.S. have been documented listening to podcasts weekly. So just think about that. That's like almost half the U.S. is listening to podcasts. So, and we even recently saw that with the election, and I'm not trying to make this a political stance in any way. But you saw Kamala, and she went on one podcast, and it was very scripted. If you're a podcast host, you could tell it was scripted. If you're not, I've heard through the grapevine it was scripted. So, and then you saw Trump going on any podcast that asked him to be, probably not any podcast that asked him to be on, but a decent amount, right? And having different conversations and just diving into whatever the host asked him and just giving him, whether we like it or not, the Trump answer of his own opinions. And so, that being said, I think you saw that even in a presidential election, there were individuals that said, you want the trust, you want the authority, you want the vote, you got to go where the people are going. And where are the people going? It's the podcast.
And it's 43% you said now, but it's on the rise. It's still growing. It's not like we've reached the max. It's like, no, this is taking over the rest of it. Get on or get out the way, right? That's kind of it. So awesome. So I know we could probably go down all the rabbit holes here. But is there anything in general that I missed, or maybe something that you wanted to add?
I think the only thing I would add is if you're thinking about podcasting in any form, feel free to reach out, because there is a lot of information out there right now that can make it seem overwhelming, can make it seem it could be the right fit. And a lot of times I do get podcasters who come to me who just want to get into it, started it, didn't realize, for example, that there's differences in the types of RSS feeds you might use or some of this back-ended things. And then they're like, I've been doing this for a year. I've been putting X amount of money into it. Why am I not seeing certain results? And the very first place I look is always that RSS feed. And that is a big thing. And everything when it comes to podcasting matters.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, if you cannot get in, and it's just like business or anything else we do, you could be shouting at the top of the mountaintop, but if no one's around to hear you, no one will know you'll be shouting.
Exactly. So for those that want to have that conversation, where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you?
So there's quite a few ways. You can go to my website, achieving-success.com, and, contact me. You can also find me on LinkedIn by searching Olivia Atkin or Achieving Success LLC. You can also email me at olivia.atkin@achieving-success.com. I do answer every LinkedIn message, Facebook message, contact form that comes in, email that comes in myself. So I do joke. I'm like, you might have to give me, up to 72 hours, but I do personally answer everything myself.
Perfect. And it's all going in the description, so I'm gonna make it easy for everybody to find. If you've never thought about starting a podcast, you should. If you've thought about starting a podcast, you should reach out to Olivia. Right? That's the order of operations. Consider it, and then talk to the expert. She's a wealth of knowledge. She's going to be able to help you get to where you want to get, and it's going to be easier than it would if you tried to reinvent the wheel yourself, because you're eventually going to land on all the same kind of ideas slower and more expensively than it would be just to reach out and have that conversation. She's exactly the same in a one-to-one as she is here. So don't be afraid. It's exactly the same. So absolutely reach out. Well, like I said, we'll put all that in the description. So just go ahead and book that call. If somebody would like to get a hold of me, you can find me at ikag.me. You can find more episodes, subscribe to our newsletter, and connect with our growing community of awesome people like Olivia. If you were somebody you would know would like to be interviewed, you can also apply on the website. But Olivia, thank you so much for your time. There's a lot here. There's so much to this. And like you said, with podcasting, all of it matters. So you got to make sure you cover your bases. So let's all take that to heart. Let's have an awesome day and go grow our circles. All right.